The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of Eldoria Palace as Prince Alexander stood at the window, his hands clasped behind his back. His wife, Princess Sophia, sat quietly on the velvet sofa, her fingers tracing the edge of a letter that had arrived the previous evening. The palace, usually bustling with activity, felt eerily silent. Alexander turned to face his wife, and their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding. They had been discussing this decision for months, arguing with advisors, consulting with the king and queen, and most importantly, listening to their hearts. Today was the day they would change everything. "The press conference is in 2 hours," Sophia said softly, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to do. She wore a simple blue dress instead of her usual formal attire, and her jewelry consisted only of her wedding ring and a small pendant, a gift from a young girl they had met during a hospital visit 3 months ago. Alexander walked over and sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "Are you certain about this? Once we speak these words, there's no going back. The palace, the advisors, my parents. They've all made their position clear." Sophia squeezed his hand and smiled, though tears glistened in her eyes. "That little girl, Emma, she changed everything for me. When she looked up at me from that hospital bed and asked why princes and princesses never cry, why they always have to be perfect, I realized we've been living behind a wall of expectations that keeps us from truly connecting with our people." The letter in Sophia's lap was from Emma's mother. The 8-year-old had lost her battle with leukemia 2 weeks ago. Her final wish had been simple yet profound. She wanted the prince and princess to tell other children that it was okay to be scared, okay to cry, okay to not be perfect. Alexander stood and helped Sophia to her feet. "Then we honor her wish. We tell our truth." The couple made their way through the palace corridors, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors who had ruled with iron fists and cold hearts. Staff members watched them pass with curious glances, sensing something different in their demeanor. The usual entourage of assistants and security seemed smaller, as if the couple had deliberately reduced their presence. In the preparation room, Margaret Whitfield, the palace communications director, paced nervously. Her usually perfect composure showed cracks as she reviewed her notes one final time. "Your Highnesses, I must once again strongly advise against this course of action. The monarchy has maintained its dignity through discretion and distance. What you're proposing could undermine centuries of tradition." Alexander straightened his simple gray suit, another departure from his usual military uniform or formal royal attire. "Margaret, we understand your concerns, but tradition without compassion is merely empty ritual. Our people are suffering. Mental health issues are at an all-time high. Suicide rates among young people have tripled in the past decade. And what has the royal family done? We've cut ribbons and made pleasant speeches while maintaining our perfect facade." Sophia added gently. "We're not abandoning our duties, Margaret. We're reimagining what those duties should be in the modern world. The people don't need distant figures on pedestals. They need leaders who understand their struggles." The communications director sighed and handed them the prepared statement, the safe, sanitized version that had been approved by the palace hierarchy. Alexander took it, glanced at the carefully worded platitudes, and then slowly tore it in half. "We'll be speaking from the heart today," he said firmly. As they waited for the final moments before the press conference, Sophia's mind drifted to the events that had led them to this point. It had started with small observations, the forced smiles at public events, the rehearsed conversations, the invisible barriers between them and the people they served. But it was their secret visits to hospitals, homeless shelters, and community centers. Visits the palace had tried to forbid, that had truly opened their eyes. She remembered Michael, the war veteran living on the streets, who had broken down crying when Alexander sat beside him on the cold pavement. Not as a prince, but as one human being to another. She thought of Sarah, the single mother working 3 jobs, who had been shocked when Sophia hugged her and admitted she understood the bone-deep exhaustion of trying to be everything to everyone. 2 minutes, Your Highnesses," an aide announced. Alexander and Sophia stood, hand in hand, and walked toward the door that led to the press room. They could hear the murmur of hundreds of journalists from around the world, all expecting another routine royal announcement. Whatever happens after this, Alexander whispered to his wife, I'm proud to stand beside you. Sophia leaned into him slightly. Emma would be proud of us. They pushed open the doors and stepped into the blinding lights of cameras, ready to show the world that even royalty could be beautifully, powerfully human. The palace press room, with its gilded walls and crystal chandeliers, had never hosted an announcement quite like the one that was about to unfold. The press room fell silent as Prince Alexander and Princess Sophia took their positions at the podium. Hundreds of journalists leaned forward, sensing something different in the royal couple's demeanor. Gone were the practiced smiles and rigid postures. Instead, two young people stood before them, vulnerable yet determined. Alexander cleared his throat, his hands gripping the podium edges. Thank you all for coming. Today, Princess Sophia and I wish to speak to you, and through you to our people. Not as representatives of an institution, but as human beings who have something important to share. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. This wasn't the typical opening to a royal announcement. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as Sophia stepped forward, her voice clear despite the emotion visible in her eyes. 3 months ago, we met a little girl named Emma in the children's cancer ward at St. Mary's Hospital. She asked us a simple question that changed our lives. Why don't princes and princesses ever cry? We gave her the answer we'd been trained to give, that we must be strong for our people. But Emma, wise beyond her 8 years, shook her head and said, But if you never cry, how do I know you understand when I'm sad? Sophia paused, taking a steadying breath. Several journalists exchanged glances, uncertain where this was heading. In the back of the room, Margaret Whitfield stood frozen, her face pale as she watched the carefully constructed royal protocol crumble. Alexander continued. Emma passed away 2 weeks ago. Her mother sent us a letter with Emma's final wish, that we tell other children it's okay to not be perfect, okay to be scared, okay to struggle. Today, we honor that wish, but we go further. We want to tell everyone, children and adults alike, that your struggles are valid, your pain is real, and you are not alone. The room remained dead silent, the weight of the moment settling over everyone present. Sophia reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not the approved palace statement, but something personal. I have struggled with anxiety for most of my adult life, Sophia said, her voice growing stronger. Behind the designer gowns and the smiling photographs, I have known the paralysis of panic attacks, the sleepless nights filled with worry, the constant fear of not being good enough. I have taken medication, sought therapy, and there were days when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. Gasps echoed through the room. A royal admission of mental health struggles was unprecedented. Cameras flashed like lightning as journalists scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Alexander placed a supportive hand on his wife's back as he spoke. I have battled depression since my teenage years. The weight of expectations, the pressure to be the perfect prince, the inability to show weakness. It nearly broke me. There were times when I wondered if the world would be better off without me. I have stood on balconies not to wave at crowds, but contemplating whether the pain would ever end. Tears now flowed freely down Sophia's cheeks as she continued. We share this, not for sympathy, but for connection. In our visits to hospitals, homeless shelters, and community centers, visits the palace advised against, we met countless people suffering in silence, believing their struggles made them weak or broken. We met parents afraid to seek help, teenagers hiding their pain, veterans suffering from PTSD with nowhere to turn. The monarchy has stood for 1,000 years, Alexander said, his voice ringing with conviction. But what good is tradition if it builds walls between us and those we serve? What value is there in maintaining a perfect image if it makes people feel ashamed of their own imperfections? A journalist in the front row raised her hand, tears visible on her own face, but Alexander shook his head gently. Please, let us finish. Sophia wiped her tears and smiled. Not the practiced royal smile, but something genuine and warm. From today forward, Prince Alexander and I pledge to use our platform differently. We are establishing the Emma Foundation, named after the brave little girl who opened our eyes. This foundation will provide free mental health services, support groups, and crisis intervention throughout the kingdom. Furthermore, Alexander added, we will be reducing our formal royal engagements to focus on direct community work. We will sit with those who are struggling, listen to their stories, and share our own. We will show up not as perfect royals, but as fellow human beings on this difficult journey called life. The couple joined hands and faced the press corps together. We know this breaks with tradition, Sophia acknowledged. We know there will be those who say we are weakening the monarchy, that we are being too informal, too emotional, too human. But we believe that in showing our vulnerability, we show our strength. In admitting our struggles, we give others permission to seek help. Alexander's voice grew thick with emotion. To anyone watching who has ever felt alone in their pain, who has hidden behind a smile while dying inside, who has been told to stay strong when what they needed was permission to fall apart, we see you. Your pain is not weakness. Your struggles do not diminish your worth. You are not alone. We cannot promise to fix all problems, Sophia added. But we promise to stand with you, to fight alongside you, to create a world where seeking help is seen as courage, not weakness, where mental health is treated with the same urgency as physical health, where no one has to suffer in silence because they fear judgment. The room erupted. Journalists jumped to their feet, some applauding, others shouting questions. But through the chaos, one sound grew louder, the sound of weeping. Hardened reporters, who had covered wars and disasters without flinching, found themselves moved to tears by the raw honesty of the moment. In living rooms, offices, and schools across the kingdom and around the world, people watched their screens in stunned silence. Social media exploded with reactions. Parents hugged their children tighter. Those who had been suffering in silence reached for their phones to finally make that call for help. Back in the palace, King Frederick and Queen Isabella watched the live broadcast in horrified silence. Advisors scrambled to draft damage control statements. But in hospitals, community centers, and homes across the nation, something else was happening. People were talking, really talking, about their struggles, their fears, their pain. The world was weeping, but they were tears of recognition, of relief, of hope. Two young royals had done the unthinkable. They had stepped down from their pedestals and revealed themselves to be beautifully, painfully human. The aftermath of the press conference rippled across the globe like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Within hours, the hashtag number royally human trended worldwide. As millions shared their own stories of struggle and survival, the palace switchboard crashed under the volume of calls. But these weren't complaints. They were messages of gratitude, of shared pain, of hope renewed. In the royal apartment that evening, Alexander and Sophia sat together on their balcony, watching the sun set over the city. The formal dinner they were supposed to attend had been cancelled, by their own choice. Instead, they shared a simple meal, their phones turned off, the weight of the day settling around them like a comfortable blanket. "Do you think we've destroyed everything?" Sophia asked quietly, nestling closer to her husband. Alexander kissed the top of her head. "Perhaps we've destroyed what needed destroying. Sometimes you have to tear down the old to build something better." Close. A knock at the door interrupted their solitude. James, their most trusted aide, entered with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Your Highnesses, you need to see this." He led them to the window overlooking the palace gates. Below, thousands of people had gathered, not in protest, but in solidarity. They held candles and signs that read, "Thank you for being human. Emma's light shines on," and "Broken but beautiful." The crowd was silent, respectful, but their presence spoke volumes. Sophia pressed her hand to her mouth, fresh tears flowing. "They came to support us?" "To support each other," Alexander corrected gently. "Look closer." Indeed, within the crowd, people were embracing, sharing stories, comforting one another. Support groups were forming spontaneously. Professional therapists, identified by hastily made badges, moved through the gathering, offering resources and immediate help to those in crisis. Over the following days, the kingdom experienced something unprecedented. Mental health helplines, previously barely used due to stigma, were flooded with calls. Therapists reported waiting lists, growing not from lack of resources but from people finally seeking help. Companies began implementing mental health days. Schools started teaching emotional literacy alongside traditional subjects. The resistance from within the palace was fierce but ultimately futile. King Frederick summoned his son for what was intended to be a severe reprimand. The king sat rigid on his throne, Queen Isabella beside him, their faces masks of royal displeasure. "You have undermined 1,000 years of tradition," the king began, his voice cold. "The monarchy survives through mystery, through distance, through fear," Alexander interrupted, something he had never done before. "Father, when was the last time you truly connected with one of our subjects? Not a orchestrated meet and greet, but a real conversation?" The king's face flushed. "That is not our role." "Then what is?" Sophia stepped forward, having insisted on accompanying her husband. To wave from carriages, to cut ribbons, to be living museum's pieces while our people suffer? Queen Isabella spoke for the first time. "You speak of suffering as if you understand it. You live in a palace. Want for nothing." "Mother," Alexander said gently but firmly, "suffering isn't measured by material wealth. The prison of expectations can be just as confining as any cell. You of all people should know that. When Hibike, a flicker of something, memory, pain, recognition, crossed the queen's face before she reasserted her royal mask. But that flicker was enough. Alexander saw it, understood it, and pressed on. "How many nights did you cry yourself to sleep in the early years, mother? How many times did you want to run from all of this? How many pills do you take to maintain that perfect composure?" The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in decades, the king and queen looked vulnerable. Human. Real. As weeks turned to months, the Emma Foundation grew beyond anything Alexander and Sophia had imagined. Donations poured in from around the world. Celebrities, politicians, and ordinary citizens shared their own mental health journeys. The foundation's centers opened in every major city, offering free counseling, support groups, and crisis intervention. But more than services, the foundation offered something invaluable: permission to be imperfect. Children learned it was okay to express difficult emotions. Adults found courage to seek help without shame. The kingdom's suicide rate, which had been climbing steadily for years, began to decline for the first time in a decade. Alexander and Sophia kept their promise to engage directly with communities. They showed up, not for photo opportunities but for real work. Alexander spent hours in veterans support groups, sharing his own struggles and listening to theirs. Sophia worked with teenage anxiety sufferers, teaching coping strategies she had learned through years of therapy. The international response was mixed, but powerful. Some criticized the couple for attention-seeking or weakening the monarchy, but for every critic, there were hundreds who found hope in their honesty. Other young royals around the world began following their example, speaking openly about their own challenges. A global movement of authentic leadership was born. 1 year after the announcement, Alexander and Sophia returned to St. Mary's Hospital, to the same ward where they had met Emma. They were dedicating a new wing, the Emma Center for Pediatric Mental Health. Emma's mother, Grace, stood with them, holding a portrait of her daughter. "She would be so proud," Grace whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She always said you two were different, that you had sad eyes that understood." She was right. As they cut the ribbon, Sophia noticed a young boy watching from a wheelchair, his bald head evidence of his own battle with cancer. His eyes held the same wise sadness Emma's had carried. She walked over and knelt beside him. "Are you scared?" she asked gently. The boy nodded. "Every day." "Me too," Sophia admitted. "But you know what? Being scared doesn't mean we're weak. It means we're human. And humans are incredibly brave. especially when they're scared. The boy smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Will you visit me again? Not as a princess, just as, of you? I promise, Sophia said, and meant it. That evening, the palace hosted its first ever real talk dinner, an informal gathering where people from all walks of life came together to share meals and stories. The golden dining hall, usually reserved for state dinners and formal occasions, rang with genuine laughter, tears, and connection. King Frederick and Queen Isabella made an unexpected appearance. The king cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. Old habits of deference, dying hard. But instead of a royal pronouncement, he spoke quietly, humbly. My son and daughter-in-law have taught this old king something valuable, he began, his voice unsteady. They've shown me that true strength lies not in hiding our humanity, but in embracing it. I want to apologize, to them, and to all of you. For too long, we confused dignity with distance, tradition with rigidity. Queen Isabella stepped forward, removing her gloves. A simple gesture that spoke volumes. We would like to support the Emma Foundation. Not just with royal patronage but with our own truth. The palace will be opening its doors for support groups. Because even palaces can be lonely places when you're struggling in silence. The world watched as an ancient institution transformed, not through revolution but through the simple, radical act of honesty. Alexander and Sophia had done more than make a statement. They had started a conversation that echoed in homes, schools, workplaces, and hearts around the globe. Years later, when historians wrote about the moment that changed the monarchy forever, they wouldn't focus on wars or political upheaval. They would write about two young royals who dared to cry in public, who chose connection over protocol, who honored a little girl's wish, and in doing so, gave millions permission to be human. The world had wept that day. Tears of recognition, tears of relief, tears of hope, and in that shared vulnerability, in that collective embrace of imperfection, something beautiful was born. The monarchy didn't fall. It rose, transformed from an institution of distance into a beacon of shared humanity. Emma's light, as the signs had proclaimed, truly did shine on. Not from a palace balcony or a royal throne, but from the hearts of everyone who found courage to say, I'm struggling, and that's okay. The most powerful statement Prince Alexander and Princess Sophia ever made wasn't spoken from a podium or written in a royal decree. It was lived, daily, in their commitment to showing up as themselves, flawed, struggling, healing, and utterly, beautifully human. The world had wept, and in weeping, had begun to heal.